I'm not ready to quit drinking, I can think of a million reasons to keep drinking. And number one is I don't believe in God, and that's just my opinion on that. But I also didn't struggle with that concept. I didn't have a relationship. My higher power, who I choose to call God, is responsible for 99%, and I'm responsible for 1%. And that 1%, I don't want to minimize that. That requires me to do a lot of work. And my sponsor says, who Lee knows, God can move mountains, but I got to bring my shovel.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast with your hosts Michael L. and Lee M. This is a show where we provide inspiration through interviews with members of the recovery community. While we are not affiliated with any 12-step recovery program, you may hear them mentioned throughout the course of an interview.
Today is February 2nd. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you again. How are you?
I'm fantastic and extremely excited today. I have my personal friend, Joe W. from Ashburn, Virginia, here to share his experience, strength, and hope around today's daily reflection.
Fantastic. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. As we normally do, we ask the guest to read the daily reflection for the day. Today's February 2nd. Would you mind getting us started?
Not at all. Not at all. Today's daily reflection, February 2nd, rescued by surrendering. Characteristic of the so-called typical alcoholic is a narcissistic, egocentric core dominated by feelings of omnipotence, intent on maintaining at all costs its inner integrity. Inwardly, the alcoholic brooks no control from man or God. He, the alcoholic, is and must be the master of his destiny. He will fight to the end to preserve that position. And that comes from AA Comes of Age, page 311. And the narrative reads, the great mystery is, why do some of us die alcoholic deaths fighting to preserve the independence of our ego while others seem to sober up effortlessly in AA? Help from a higher power, the gift of sobriety, came to me when an otherwise unexpected desire to stop drinking coincided with my willingness to accept the suggestions of the men and women of AA. I had to surrender, for only by reaching out to God and my fellows could I be rescued.
Wow. Thanks for reading that. It's a powerful reading. What does that mean to you when you read it?
Well, I will say that my name is Joe and I'm an alcoholic and I qualify for this program a couple times over. What this means to me personally is that, first of all, at a high level, my alcoholism is a disease that tells me that I don't have a disease, that I'm okay, that I can drink safely. And I know today that I'm not a safe drinker, but my story, I can relate to this based on my story because I came in here in the 90s and went to meetings for several years and stopped drinking for about 8 years and then picked up a drink again and went back out for 15 years and came back in. But those last 4 or 5 years before I came back in my sobriety date's May 31st, 2013. Those last 4 or 5 years before I came in, I remember thinking that this is just my lot in life. And, I'm an alcoholic. I didn't think about coming back into AA and I'm just going to die an alcoholic death. So I might as well keep drinking. And I probably would have done that due to circumstances rather than virtue that brought me back in here. That's kind of tied into what the reading is. I love the daily reflections because the reading is our approved literature, and I will never question that. The narrative, a little more subjective because it's someone's opinion, but I'm trying to get out of the business of judgment or questioning things, and I love the narrative too. That's a long way of saying that, help from a higher power, the gift of sobriety came when an otherwise unexpected desire to stop drinking coincided with my willingness. It was really the surrender. And it's like, I am out of options. I want to die, but I don't have the courage to kill myself. And I'm willing to do anything that you all suggest. So that's kind of what I got on that.
So surrender is not easy. And in many cases, it's not something we can choose. Tell me a little bit about your surrender.
Well, as an alcoholic in recovery, I have a daily surrender. And I kind of think of this as I like the analogy, in a general sense of coming in here and totally surrendering as kind of the phoenix risen from the ashes. Like for me, my story is I had to be cut down to nothing. I came in on a divorce. When I went back out in 1998, I remember I had accumulated all the things that I always wanted. I met a woman. We fell in love. We got married, or we got engaged in 99. We bought a townhouse in 99. We got married in 2000. My first son was born in 2001. We moved out to a nice single family house in 2002. My second son in 2003. And I measured my life by those milestones that were very important, like the things I always wanted. But the problem is I gave all that stuff away to alcohol, my alcoholism. And I'm a fighter. And it's hard for a guy like me to surrender. And I fought this to the bitter end. And it cut me down to my knees. Bill talks about in Bill's story how it was a boomerang that came back and shredded him to ribbons. And I could relate to that. I will just say one thing that's very, very important for my story and for my recovery is this time when I came back in, I got a sponsor, and the first time I did not. And that was the game changer for me. But as far as surrendering, like, hey, I'm not a safe drinker. That guy asked me if I could drink safely, and I'm not a safe drinker. And I need to surrender to my innermost self. I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink safely. Now give me a chance to learn how to live a different way of life. And that's what the rest of the steps, starting with step 2, provides me.
Did you have a concept of a higher power when you first came in the second time?
I did. It was funny. I was talking with a guy earlier. I have the privilege of helping other guys through the steps. And I was talking to a guy earlier, and we read We Agnostics today, ironically, or not. And we were talking about that. I never struggled with the God thing. I know some people do. But I also can say, like, it's a struggle with the surrender thing. Like, if I'm not ready to quit drinking, I can think of a million reasons to keep drinking. And number one is I don't believe in God. And that's just my opinion on that. But I also didn't struggle with that concept. I didn't have a relationship. I was going to church. I believed in God, but I couldn't stop drinking. So what the steps have provided me is a pathway, a process, so I can find a higher power that I have a true relationship with, that is a friend that has my back, that's helping me or keeping me sober on a daily basis.
Tell me about the way you nurture that relationship with a higher power. It's so important.
It's through the 11th step, so maybe if enough time has passed, I'll come back in November, because the daily reflections is cool because they're 12 months in the year and 12 steps, so they coincide each, but it's really through the 11th step. And the breakdown, as my sponsor explained to me, is steps 1 through 3 are the foundation. 1 is I am totally screwed. I surrender. Number 2 is there's something outside of myself that can help me with my problem, because the problem is me. I can't stop drinking. And by the way, drinking is just a symptom, but I can't stop drinking when I come in here, and I need something outside of myself, the group, AA, whatever, to help me. I believe it was Einstein that said the problem and the solution do not reside in the same place initially, because I'm blocking off God. And then number 3 is, what's my decision going to be? Am I going to move forward with the process? 4 through 9, he explained to me, cleaning up the wreckage of the past, all the stuff I'm carrying around, my resentment, my false belief systems, my fears, all the stuff that's holding me back from finding some happiness, being happy, joyous, and free in life. All the stuff I've carried around, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. I don't have to label it. And then 10, 11, and 12 are, some people call them the maintenance steps. We call them the growth steps or the living steps. And it's a step 11 that I have is so huge in my life. And just real quick story. So yesterday I woke up and it was a work day, and I had to do some emails before I do my step 11th. And I am religious. I know it's not a religious program, but I'm religious about doing my 11th step. It's a spiritual program. But anyways, very dedicated to do the 11th step. And I had to do some emails, and there were some things going on at work before I had a chance to jump into my 11th step. And it was cool because I was so cognizant and aware of that. And I think it was like an 11th step impromptu because I didn't do my readings or do my prayer, but I was so plugged into, I haven't done it yet, that I made sure that I conducted myself based on I have it up on the wall, the St. Francis prayer. I want to push out the love. And, when there's stuff going on, like I have to be very cognizant and aware of that. One of the things that this program has given me is awareness. And from that awareness, I have choices. I have choices in how I, respond to situations instead of reacting based on fear or based on self.
So surrender is such a problem for many alcoholics, and surrendering to the fact that I'm an alcoholic, while recovery and the program and the steps have helped me do that, I feel like the word surrender has such negative connotations with it. Does it show up anywhere else in your life? Are you able to leverage the same concept to help you outside the program?
Well, one of the things I've heard in the rooms is that as it pertains to surrender, and the first step is, while I may be powerless, I'm not helpless. And one of the things we talk about, and it's kind of occurred to me a couple of years ago that I try to remember, is that for me, I believe that my higher power, who I choose to call God, is responsible for 99%, and I'm responsible for 1%. And that 1%, I don't want to minimize that. That requires me to do a lot of work. And my sponsor says, who Lee knows, God can move mountains, but I got to bring my shovel. I got to put the work in. And it's an actual privilege. It's not work. It's not a chore. It's a privilege to be able to live this way and to let go. And you're talking to a guy who couldn't let go of anything. I came in so angry and so hurt over my divorce. And, today I have a relationship with my ex-wife. It's funny little story because, I would have to learn how to do this. How do I learn to live life and take what we learn and talk about in the rooms of AA to the outside? So today, talking to my ex-wife about my son, and, he has some issues and, drinking and stuff, whatever. And she said, and I guess he came home last night and he had been drinking, came to her place. We're divorced now, obviously. So came to her place and she said he had been drinking, and she goes, I didn't want to confront him because I've learned how to do that. I have PTSD from the past when I used to confront and the reaction. And she's talking about me. And I didn't react to that, and that's like, I'm not patting myself on the back. Like, let's not pat Joe on the back. Let me not pull my shoulder out of socket for for trying to just be a decent human being. But the fact that I can be a decent human being and not to react to that stuff and have some empathy, if she wants to, she's on her journey, she can do whatever she wants with that, but I don't have to react to it. So I'm in a place where I can be, loving. Love and tolerance is our code, right? So I'm able to do that.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. I love it. And I'm reminded of the saying, keeping your side of the street clean. How else has the program helped you in your relationships?
That's a great question, and it's funny that you mentioned the fourth step there with keeping mentioned my side of the street. And I will say that the fourth step was a revelation in my life, and that's no BS. I cannot minimize that as a turning point in my life. To go and being a victim and so angry. The delusion, we talk about the delusion of drinking, but the delusion of my thinking, we talk about the obsession of the mind. To come in and thinking that, how can this woman divorce me when I'm such a great guy? And how can all these other people do these things to me when I'm such a great guy? To seeing what my role was, not as a process to feel worse about myself. Hats off to my sponsor. We went through the steps out of the big book, which is our program of recovery, and people can do it any way they want to. So no judgment here, but I'm so grateful he did that. And he explained to me that, and it says this in our literature, it says in the big book, it says, we have to get down to causes and conditions of why I drank. So not as a process to feel worse about myself, but as a process to understand, as he said, what made me tick. So from that, I'm able to learn on a daily basis. And by the way, disclaimer, I don't do this perfectly. This is a way of life, going through 4 and 5 and then 6 and 7, daily things. And my sponsor said, I'm living in the present now. So 4 through 9 are kind of incorporated in step 10 on a daily basis, but continuing to look at myself, and also learning more about myself. My relationships today are great. I've struggled. Relationship with ex-wife are great. Relationship with the kids is great. It's not always up and down. The place where I've had the most growth, and it's usually through, we have a friend down here, and I think it's in the 12 and 12. Pain is a touchstone of spiritual growth. Like, I'm not levitating here. It's through trial and error, and that's okay, right? And so a lot of this is through these relationships. So I get divorced, I come in here, I get in these romantic relationships. So it's relationships with women. And it occurred to me, and there have been some ups and downs with some of these, but the last several ones have really been amazing. But it occurred to me, like, not only do I try to live by the St. Francis prayer and see what I can push out and give in a relationship instead of taking, because I spent my whole life taking, but it also occurs to me that these steps not only give me a process, like in a relationship, I learn more. I'm learning, I'm getting to know someone else when I meet them and start this relationship, but I'm also getting to know myself better. And wow, like that's like, I don't know if that's fourth dimension stuff or not, but like, I'm getting to know myself better. And then I can see like the patterns of behavior, like a situation occurs and I always react the same way, which is like a defense mechanism. And like, I don't have to do that anymore, because it's not like, I don't have to protect myself from, I've got God protecting me now. I don't have to like control everything and feel like I need to protect myself. So I get to be a little more open, get back to that open-mindedness that we talk about in step 2, and it really helps my relationships. And I also learn about boundaries and not overstepping that, I talked about that 1%, 99% earlier. So like, and again, we're melding all the steps together because this is how we live our lives and this is what we're supposed to do. But talk about the spiritual axiom, right? Anytime I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. It's never anyone else. It's like how I'm taking something. And we learn to put up boundaries, so I'm not a lapdog or anything like that. But it's just cool. Like when I get out of my 1% lane, I'm in God's 99 is where I'm disturbed. And that's when, oh, okay. So I'm trying to control something or fix something or manage something. And by the way, my life is unmanageable. I can do this stuff in reverse. If I'm going in reverse, then it's going to be so terrible that I'm going to end up picking up a drink. I'm just do the steps in reverse. So, yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of letting go of attachment to outcomes. And specifically, as you were describing the relationships and what you're learning about yourself and learning about others. And it's like you're able to be present without worrying about where it's going.
Yes, I would totally agree with that. And yeah, I mean, and it's and my sponsor said, I got to say no profanity yet. So knock on wood, let's keep it that way. My sponsor always said, if I got a foot in tomorrow and a foot in yesterday, I'm pooping all over today, and that's how he said it. Like, and I do like part of the 11th step. Okay. Everything's melded together. Lee knows this. I'm a big yoga guy. I love yoga. I started practicing yoga about 5 years. I was in here a couple of years, started doing yoga. Yoga is part of my 11th step practice. But the one thing about yoga, and I love the Buddhist stuff too, is that I'm able to it helps me to keep present. Because I so quickly like spin up into the future. Anxiety, I've heard, is fear of the future. Depression is guilt and remorse over the past. And that's the stuff that blocks me off. And here's the other thing about that is it occurred to me that my higher power, again, who I choose to call God, is only here in the present. God is not in the future or the past. And God is the source that's keeping me sober, required that I follow these rules that Dr. Silkworth talks about, or the suggestions or clear-cut directions, as it says. Why would I separate myself from the source that's keeping me sober, who's only in the present? And that's like a good reminder. And it goes back to that disturbed thing. That's not to say I don't have anxiety and depression sometimes, because sometimes, I wake up in the morning and we got a friend down here. He's great. He's like, wake up in the morning. It's like, OS, like, oh my God. And it's so much better than it used to be. But like, I will wake up, and it says this in the 11th step. Upon awakening, we think about our day. It says, but before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. Ironically, it says we ask that we be divorced from self-pity. And when my sponsor took me through that, I say, yeah, I'm going through a divorce. I like that. I can relate to that. But it tells us, like, this is how we are, right? This is how I am. Like, I'm going to wake up in the morning and think about me. Like, oh my gosh, I have all this stuff I have to do. But it clear-cut directions, man. Like, do this, stop, pause. Okay, God, you're in charge. I know everything's okay. That's the thing about it. Like, everything's okay. Like, my mind will tell me it's not okay, and it is okay. And sometimes for us, the blessing for us, this is why the oxymorons, like the surrender to win, sometimes for us, an absolute miracle that I'm not picking up a drink today. An absolute miracle, because I'm the guy who lived my life to drink. I gave all that stuff away that I love dearly for drinking because I'm an alcoholic. And the fact that I don't have a desire to drink or drug today is the number one miracle and blessing in my life.
I'm a little shocked. The person you described before just seems so different than the person we're talking with today. And I know that the program has the power to do that, but I'm just curious about, I sense humility. I sense, a real solid knowledge of the principles and the steps and the program. I'm curious about, what does your daily practice look like in terms of the program itself, and maybe a little bit about your fellowship?
Well, good question. I consider myself a seeker, and I certainly, I love the quote, like my sponsor on this. And I actually have been through the steps a couple of times. So I kind of have co-sponsors now. My original sponsor talks about how this is the AA is the huddle for us. This is a huddle, like a football game, like we're huddling up here, and and then we go out to the world and take what we learn out here in the world. So I try to hit a meeting every day. I try not to be judgment. Like, one of my biggest defects is judgment. I'm aware of that. So like when Zoom started, when the pandemic hit, I'm like, I'm cool with Zoom. Like I can't, like, hey, to each their own. And I know that this is not cool. Like, I know this is screwed up with this pandemic and stuff. A lot of empathy in my heart goes out to people trying to get sober now. If I start, for me, like, it's a blessing that we have Zoom. It's not like a bad thing. So I go to a lot of Zoom meetings. I've gone to some on-site meetings. I try to go to meetings. I try to stay in touch with guys, with men and women. Lee and I are really, really good friends. We stay in touch. By the way, a lot of this stuff I've learned from Lee. Lee was here when I came in. And I try to make myself available to other people. It's absolute blessing. Like, and you talk about you mentioned the knowledge earlier. It's an absolute gift. It's a lot of this stuff comes, one of the biggest growth pieces in my recovery is working with other guys, taking other men through the steps. And I remember when my original sponsor would take me through the steps, and I would thank him profusely, like, thanks, man, thanks. And he'd be like, dude, you're helping me more than I'm helping you. I'm like, it's a bunch of crap. No, but it's true, because they're guys that I get to take through the steps, and they're helping me more than I'm helping them. That's the biggest thing. But everything in AA, we're not living, and I've heard this too, like, we don't get sober and go through the steps to live our lives in the rooms of AA. It's easy in here because we're all trying to live by these spiritual principles. It's my job and a privilege to take it out into the world. And we were talking about this earlier. I'd like to say the world needs us now more than ever, but the world's always needed us. My self-centeredness and it's not, there's some not cool stuff happening right now, but we're like the Salerno beachhead, right? We are like the Salerno beachhead. If they're riding down the road years from now, it's gonna be like, look at these AAs. They stayed sober. They stayed together. They were a beacon of light in in this world during troubled time, in this troubled world, which, by the way, it's always been a troubled world. And we get to bring something positive into it instead of just taking stuff and causing more trouble.
What would you say to a newcomer, or maybe even somebody not quite sure they belong here?
Well, I tell them to keep coming back. I try not to push anything on people. I just know my stories. I came in, I have 2 trips in here, and I share my story. And my sponsor, we got to get him on here because I've quoted him 10, 20 times already. I remember he used to, when he's taking me through the steps, he's like, Joe, you got a strong story, man. And I didn't know what he was talking about, but now I know. Yes, each day I'm in here doing my best to do this. And again, I don't do it perfectly. There's like 2 different tales of my coming into the rooms. I pray that this continues. And today I'm focused on that. But between the first time of coming in and just going to meetings, and hey, we got a 3rd tradition. Respect it. The traditions are for us. If there weren't traditions, there'd be no group. So I love the traditions. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. I had a desire to stop drinking. I came to meetings for a couple of years. I picked up a 3-year chip, I think. I don't think I went every day I think I went every day for about 2 years and tailed off. Never got a sponsor. I did the first half of the first step. I was a dry drunk. And I was miserable. And I'm not here to question anything, but for me, I'm not sure what's worse, being a dry drunk or a wet drunk. At least after a while, when I picked up again, it brought some sort of relief, but then it stopped working like the boomerang and shredded my butt to ribbons. But I know this time coming in here, I got a sponsor. So I will share that with people. But early on, like I do what my sponsor said, like if we're at the club or at a meeting, I'll get a when and where started for someone. I'll give someone a phone number and just say, hey man, it's okay. Call me anytime. Give me a buzz. Don't pick up a drink. Maybe come to a meeting tomorrow. Let me know if I can do anything to help. And, we're here for you, man. It's a we program. We're all in this thing together. And try to kind of keep it simple and not to pounce on people, not to start talking about God and all this other stuff. Like these people don't want to hear that stuff. If they're like me, just want to stop hurting. Like I'm scared and I want to stop hurting and I want to stop, I'll ask them do you want to stop drinking? Like that's the one thing, if they're like, I don't want to make an assumption on anything, but, if you're in an AA meeting, unless you're getting a slip signed, pretty good chance drink is not working for you anymore. But I may ask them that question. I'm like, hey, if you don't want to drink, then call us before you pick up a drink. Just try to keep it simple and make people feel welcome.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Well, thanks so much for coming here and sharing your story with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Likewise. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And thanks to Joe for joining us today. If you want to read more about recovery, learn more about the podcast, you can visit our blog. That's at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. We've got a Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/dailyreflectionpodcast, and you can find us on Twitter at dailyreflector. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.